Hello, my little apes. We are going to start with chapter 3 today, which really is an introduction to ecology. And this is something that we've touched on through the year. And so some of it's going to be review, some of it's going to be a little bit new, but I hope that it's all material that you're pretty comfortable with. Now, you'll have to find this presentation on either Blackboard or Google Site to access this video. I can't do that with the audio, but it's actually a pretty cool video to introduce this unit. The basic idea behind it is that an island nation called Borneo had a problem with malaria, and they had no way to treat it. And so it started with malaria and it ended with the World Health Organization having to quite literally parachute cats into Borneo. So it's a great way to show how things in nature are all interconnected and how one action can have a lot of unintended reactions, and just really kind of hitting home how everything is connected in nature. So if you do have a chance, please go ahead and click that link and see. It's just a cool story that talks about how nature is connected. So these are our different ecological levels. I think you've seen this diagram before, but basically what this shows us is we start with one little critter. If you're studying at an organismal level, you add a bunch of the same species, and that's a population. Now, this is what we started our year with, talking about population characteristics like exponential growth, logistic growth, and what we'll focus on for this unit is both community and ecosystem level interactions. So our community interaction is taking a look at how biotic things interact, so all the living things in the environment. Whereas in the ecosystem, we add abiotic factors. So in this example, it could be things like the pH, the salinity, the water temperature, how much light is getting through, currents, tides. All of those things would be the abiotic factors that impact how the critters live. Now, this is something we've talked about, but I wanted to hit on it again, and this is ecosystem services. So we can characterize ecosystem services as provisioning, regulating, cultural, or supporting. So provisioning services are pretty much things we get from the environment. So energy, like cutting down trees for energy, digging up fossil fuels for energy, getting our food, like harvesting fish from the ocean. This should be biomedical, ways for transportation like rivers, and natural defense. Regulating services, these are things that help the ecosystem to maintain homeostasis pretty much. So preventing floods, erosion control. We've talked about how trees do both of those really well. Those are ecosystem services provided by trees. Control of pests and pathogens, like having lots of biodiversity helps to control pests. Cultural services, things that, remember, we've talked about the aesthetic value of nature, being able to get educational or recreational resources from them. And then finally, supporting services, things like nutrient cycling. Primary productivity is something we'll hit on in this unit. That is essentially like photosynthesis, the transporting or the cycling of nutrients, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus. And for photosynthesis, it's the cycling of carbon and getting oxygen out of our atmosphere. So speaking of that regulating service, photosynthesis is a major ecosystem services that trees provide. Now, all autotrophs will go through photosynthesis. Now, we've talked about this equation before, and again, it is something you need to know. So we take our water, carbon dioxide, and energy from the sun, and within the chloroplasts of our producers, it can create glucose, which is C6H12O6, and oxygen. Now, again, I think this is an equation you guys should memorize. But remember, it's not that hard because you guys do know that water and carbon dioxide and light go in. You also know that glucose and oxygen comes out. So the only molecule you need to memorize is this glucose. And then remember, our prefixes 6, 6, and 6. So don't forget to make sure that you are a balanced equation. Now, the thing about photosynthesis is it also has a partner equation in respiration. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration are mirror images of each other. So here are the products of photosynthesis, the glucose and the oxygen. And then what comes out is the products of cellular respiration are water, carbon dioxide, and energy. Now, in this case, the energy is most often going to be ATP. Now, it is important to note that all living things go through cellular respiration. So even trees that are going through photosynthesis, they will also turn around and use some of that energy, use some of that oxygen, so that they can get energy for themselves to feed. So this is just a good way of taking a look at these equations, that photosynthesis, the carbon dioxide and water go in, and oxygen and glucose come out, and these products of photosynthesis turn around and are the reactants for aerobic respiration, cellular respiration, and then the products are carbon dioxide and water. So we've talked about this before as our new carbon cycle. So try to always kind of be fitting these topics into stuff we've learned through the year. So this is our new carbon cycling. Carbon is cycling through our living things that are currently going on now. Now, another synonym for photosynthesis is primary production. So this is likely how you'll see it on the AP test. Now, when we take a look at primary production, we have two ways of looking at it. Gross primary production is how much total photosynthesis is going on. So this would be total, how much glucose and oxygen is a tree creating. Now, remember we said before that the tree turns around and uses some of that oxygen and glucose as food for themselves. So you have to take the GPP, the gross primary production, and you have to subtract the energy that they use. And typically we'll do this as far as amount of carbon dioxide that they turn around and use, amount of carbon that they used. So really what the NPP, or net primary production, tells us is how much food is available for the next level. What we do see is that there is a net gain in oxygen, that the trees and the producers do not use all of the oxygen. So one way that we can measure NPP is oxygen produced. Now this shows us the net primary production of several different of our biomes. And we talked about this when we covered our biomes, that swamps and marshes are incredibly productive areas. So what this means by this much NPP in grams of carbon per meter squared, that they will have a lot of food left over for the next level up on the food chain, which are our herbivores. The next most productive land environment are our tropical rainforests, and then our seasonal forests. So you can see that it goes down into our deserts are our least productive, our polar deserts, and then our tropical deserts. Now in the marine ecosystems, remember that primary production does go on in our oceans as well, and that coral reefs, the zooxanthellae that live in the coral, and the algae that lives on the reefs themselves, they are incredibly productive areas. So they support a lot of biodiversity. Now the ocean adds a different level of complexity though, because light does not travel as well through water. And so once you get to the very, very deep areas, we do still have primary production going on. It's just not photosynthesis. So we've mentioned these before, but at the very, very deep depths of our oceans, all along that divergent boundary that we talked about with plate tectonics, are hydrothermal vents. So these hydrothermal vents are the sites for chemosynthesis, where bacteria convert sulfur coming up from cracks in the ocean floor, and they'll convert it to organic materials and molecules that are available for our next level on the food chain. Now our ocean also doesn't have photosynthesis going through evenly through depth, because we start to lose our light as we keep going in depth. And by about 100 feet, we've lost all of our visible light. And so what happens is as you go deeper, what you start to see is more blue-green algae, because they are able to use that blue-green wavelength of light to continue to photosynthesize even at depth. But this graph shows us that you do have a lot of photosynthesis in our surface areas. But once you start to get deeper and deeper in depth, the cellular respiration outpaces our photosynthesis. And so this is why oxygen is much more plentiful up at our upper levels of the ocean. Now, what I want us to focus on is this concept of primary productivity. So what I have found for you is a virtual lab on primary productivity. So what I'd like you to do is either follow this link, or it's posted in Google Sites. It's also posted in Google Classroom and posted in Blackboard. So this is the document. I do need you to download this, or at least have it open on a screen so you can record your data separately. And then this video will allow you to collect the data as you go through. So this is kind of a fast-forwarded lab on primary productivity. So complete this, and this should give us a good review of calculating that primary productivity, being able to work the difference between net primary production and gross primary production. Essentially, it's a subtraction problem. If you have your net primary production, your NPP, what you have to do is subtract your total photosynthesis, which is your GPP, minus the cellular respiration. So it is just a subtraction problem, but it is a skill that you have to be able to develop. So this should help you with that primary productivity. So give this a shot and feel free to email me with any questions or trouble that you have along the way.